All right, everybody. Peace and blessings. I am Berhinda Williams, visionary impact coach and founder of the Power of Girlhood. And I'm joined tonight with Donna Dinges, who is a beacon in the Metro Detroit community and has made recent headlines because of harassment that has befallen her in her community, in her home. She has lived in Grosse Pointe for 11 years without issue until a neighbor um, puts up a KKK flag facing her window. And just to contextualize, I'm going to have Jadonna speak in her own words. Um, this is reminiscent of America's long-standing history and contentiousness with Black people. And so, with the release of Lee Daniels' brilliant biopic of uh, The People versus Billie Holiday and her song Strange Fruit, marking bloody summer of lynchings in the United States. And the bill sitting in Congress was only up for consideration, not passed, but up for consideration after insurmountable evidence of the harm and death befalling and terror created for Black people. And as we move through Jim Crow to gerrymandering or redlining, this treatment is not new. However, we want to invite a conversation and invite Jadonna into, in her own words, share about the experience and what we can do. Because not only has the incident put salt in the wound, the silencing, she has been silenced. And as we know how things move on social media, melees ensue, and the hurt then begins to exacerbate. And so we're calling on allies and we're calling on community. And community has shown up. We're not saying that, but we have to continue, and she will not be silenced. So, Jadonna, welcome.
Thank you, Berhinda. Thank you so much for having me.
You have been such a pillar in the community and such a tireless investment, even in the power of girlhood. You know, setting our girls up to feel good about themselves, to put their best foot forward, especially during really rites of passage like experiences like prom and going to see Michelle Obama. You have been
Mhm.
such a pillar in there, demonstrating and acknowledging Black excellence. And so we're coming up on February 26th. That was the anniversary of the death of Trayvon Martin.
Yes.
Um, February 28th, this is Ahmaud Arbery. And remember, it was several months before the video even surfaced.
Yeah.
We'll be coming up on Breonna Taylor's um, untimely death. And also in May, then George Floyd. And so it
Yeah.
begs the question, with all this blood that has been spilled, and not just them, because we can go back.
Yes.
Just even here recently, all of the blood that has been spilled, it feels that the needle has only moved ever so slightly in this conversation. So if you could share with our audience when you open your window and see a flag, that specific flag, what does that do to you on an emotional and spiritual and even physical level?
Well, let me kind of take you back. So the date was February 16th. My ex-husband went to take out the trash, and when he came back in, he said, "There's a flag in the window of the house next door that says Invisible Empire." I didn't know what that meant. I said, "Okay, what does that mean?" I didn't know if that was like, is that something, associated with Star Wars? What does that mean? And he said, "No, it's Invisible Empire is the Klan." And now I grew up in Detroit. He grew up in the Benton Harbor area. Neither of us have seen Klan paraphernalia in person. But he knew. And so he said, "Look out the window." And so I moved the curtains. I'm in my dining room right now. This background behind me are my dining room curtains. I moved the curtain, and sure enough, there is a Klan flag staring back at me in the neighbor's window. It was in the top of the window, so I'm standing up, and it's at eye level. Um, I was shocked, and I was angry. How dare he? Because the Klan flag is a symbol of hatred, it's a symbol of terror, it's a symbol of death, it's a symbol of fear, it is a symbol of intimidation. It is put, Klan flags are not put in places to terrorize or scare or elicit fear in white people. They're specifically, the Klan was an organization that killed, murdered, and terrorized Black people. So I was furious, furious. Uh, and I immediately called a friend. This friend lives in Grosse Pointe Park as well. He happens to be white, and not because I didn't call him because he was white. I called him because he was my friend. Because my ex-husband, as you know, Brenda, is also white. So the person who saw the flag first was white. So I called him and I told him that I saw this flag, and he said, "You need to call the police." And I said, "I'm not going to call the police." And he said, "What?" I said, "No, because 4 weeks prior to that, I had gone out, Gerald had gone out, my ex-husband had gone out to put the recycling in the recycling bin. And there in the recycling bin was a full can of gasoline. So that means that someone came onto my property, they walked through the gate, opened the top of the recycling bin, put the gasoline down inside of the recycling bin, and closed the lid. I called the Grosse Pointe Park Police Department about the gasoline. They told me there was nothing they could do. They acted as if it were, like, hey, on Wednesdays, we give you a free can of gas. What's your problem, lady? They told me they couldn't fingerprint the gas can. They couldn't fingerprint the recycle bin. They couldn't fingerprint anything. And they took the gas can and left. So I had zero confidence in the Grosse Pointe Park's police department's handling of this act of ethnic intimidation or hate crime. That's and that's still how I view it.
Correct. It's a hate crime. And I just want to pause you here so that people understand the gravitas of why you hesitated to even
Yes.
involve the police in the first place. So if you can explain for people so that they understand the relationship between Black folk and the police and why you hesitated to even call the police in the first place.
Sure. So, as we start, as Brenda stated at the beginning of the call, I've lived in Grosse Pointe Park for 11 years, and it's been uneventful. I don't have any problems with the police. I've never had, been arrested or harassed or anything like that. But about 6 years ago, the same neighbor had gone out onto his back porch with a gun and began to fire into the air. Now, I know that happens in some communities on New Year's Eve, which I think is horrible. It shouldn't happen anywhere because it's dangerous. Bullets come up with the same force. They go down with the same force that they go up with. So if you're shooting into the air, the bullet has to go down somewhere. And it could hit a car, a person, anything could happen. So I think that that's a very dangerous act. And I really wish people would stop doing that on New Year's Eve. That's not the way to celebrate, but that's a side issue. This was not a New Year's Eve celebration. This was not around that time of year. This person, he is a white man, stood on the back porch of his home and shot his gun into the air. He just held it up and shot. Pow, 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 pow. And I don't know a ton about guns, but there were a lot of shots fired. I called 911. The Grosse Pointe Park Police Department answered, and the dispatcher said to me, I said, there are shots being fired on my street. He asked me where I lived. I told him. And then the person said, those shots are coming from Detroit, ma'am. And I thought, I'm watching the man next door to me shoot his gun. And you're telling me the shots are coming from Detroit. I said, the shots aren't coming from Detroit because I'm watching them come out, the man shoot his gun next to me. And they said they sent a squad car. They came out the next day. They did not even come out that night. The next day. They knocked on his door. Everyone knew he was home because we don't have driveways and his car was parked on the street. And he just refused to come to the door. He just didn't come to the door. And the police got in their cars and drove away. I was appalled because that would not happen to a Black person.
Which did not happen for Breonna Taylor because was her door not kicked in?
Exactly. Her door
without a warrant, kicked in, right? Because
exactly.
There was an assumption, and therefore she lost her life.
She lost her life. Yep. And so they drove away, and we were left to deal with the aftermath of someone who was allowed to get away. That's a crime. Shooting a gun in a residential neighborhood like that is a crime. And if the police had gone over there, investigated, looked for shell casings, whatever type of police work they do. I'm not a forensic scientist. I'm just a regular citizen. But if they had done what they were supposed to do and done their due diligence and done their jobs, maybe this person next to me would no longer have a gun because he would have had this, crime. Or
no longer be your neighbor or anyone else's neighbor for that matter.
Right. Yes. And so I knew from that incident that nothing would be done. So I watched this man walk around in the community, taking his garbage out with his gun at his side, walking his dog with his gun at his side. And this is not someone who's in law enforcement. If you're an FBI agent or maybe you're a prosecutor or something, or you have a job where people may know who you are and you're in danger just doing everyday things, I can understand it. Maybe you're a judge or something, or like I said, a police officer. But I don't know what this guy does, but he's not a police officer. But you're walking your dog with your gun. So it's an act meant to elicit fear in the neighbors. So I knew that he was unwell. I'm just going to say that. He wasn't well. But he has a gun. So that incident happened. So I knew, between that incident, the gasoline, it's like the police department is not, they're not good at their jobs. I'm just going to say that. They're probably really good at writing tickets, but investigating other things, not so much. So I knew if I called about a gun, this man shooting a gun into the air and they didn't do anything, and I called about gasoline being left on my property that I did not put there, that they didn't do anything, that they weren't going to do anything about the Klan flag. That's, minor in compared to the other two incidents. So I didn't call the Grosse Pointe Park police. I called the Attorney General's office. The person I spoke with there couldn't have cared less. She told me there was nothing they could do. What do you want us to do? It's his First Amendment rights. And so that didn't help. And then I called the FBI, and the FBI said it is his First Amendment rights, but the fact that the flag was facing your home, he was trying to send a strong message. And so they took a report and they said, well, if it escalates, if he, tries to harm you and, says something to you, keys your car, they went through a kind of a list of potential things, then, you call us back. And so I found that very unsettling, that someone has to harm you or, do something to you or harm your property before it's taken seriously. So I was, pretty discouraged. And then I thought about it, good old social media. So I wrote a Facebook post, put the picture up, wrote a Facebook post, and it just began to take hold. People were commenting about it and sharing it and sharing it and sharing it. And a friend of mine reached out and suggested that I get the media involved. So she said, do you want to get the media involved? Because otherwise it's probably not going to end up coming down, which is a shame too. And I said, sure. So she reached out to a reporter from Channel 4, and the reporter called over to the to the police department and the city hall and so forth, and got some individuals involved there. And she called me back. The reporter was Maura McDonald from Channel 4. And so Maura called and talked to the officials at the city. And then she called me back. And what she said really upset me too. She said that they were going to send some detectives out. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Excuse me, I have to get some water. I'm sorry.
Sure.
But they were going to send detectives, but they were going to send plainclothes detectives in an unmarked car because my neighbor next door doesn't like the police. And I was taken aback by that. So you're going to talk to someone about a potential hate crime, or any crime. And along the way, you're going to run interference and make sure that that conversation is presented to him in a way that he finds palatable because he doesn't like the police. What? I want to know in what universe would that happen to a Black person, that you send them, and I said that to the police chief. Brenda, you know me, I have a kind of wicked sense of humor and a kind of sharp tongue. And so I said to the police chief, I'm looking at your uniform. You have a, blue polyester. I like Valentino. So would you send, someone in Valentino to my house? Or would you send Morris Chestnut and Idris Elba to my house? Because I would find them more palatable as police officers other than these two white police officers. That's crazy. And they said, well, we think if we sent a marked car, he might go berserk because he's unhinged and he has a gun. So he's unhinged and he has a gun, and you're police officers who have guns too.
And doesn't this sound, not to cut you off, but I just want people to understand that this relationship is eerily familiar to the Charleston incident, where a church it was a massacre, and yet the killer is taken away peacefully. No taser. He was not shot.
Nope.
And he was also offered something to eat.
Yeah.
When we look at the responses this summer to George Floyd's lynching, a young white male comes from out of state and walks down the street with an army, with a military caliber rifle, fires, hits people, yet there was no interruption as he moves down the street. And even most recently, January 6, 2021, what happened in the Capitol, there was seemingly no repercussion. A life was lost. In addition to the emotional duress that this continuously puts us under. And I just want to center this too, because even psychologists have noted that when an incident like this happens in the Black community, and Janani, you understand this because you're ours, this also creates a trauma response and a trigger within all of us as well.
Absolutely.
You look like my mother, my aunt, my sister, anyone in my own family. And in the Black community, we can trace the relationships, right, with the police officers, with with school systems where the system has been punitive and often lethal. And so it brings back up that trauma. And I just also want people to understand too, that in addition to their lack of response and making sure that their surveillance perhaps was more palatable, it also brings up another issue, that you have been gaslit on social media or even standing your own ground, standing in your own dignity.
Absolutely. I mean, being one of the first questions that was asked of me by the interim police chief here in Grosse Pointe Park is, why didn't you call the police? And I immediately responded, it's not my job to help you do your job. You need to figure out why I didn't call the police. And I said, so I referred to that gasoline incident, how that was handled. And he said, well, if you weren't pleased with how they handled that situation, we have a complaint protocol. Why didn't you use a complaint protocol? And I said, so what exactly would I've been complaining about? They weren't unprofessional. They weren't rude. They didn't harm me. They didn't demean me. They just didn't care. Is there an apathy, box for me to check on this complaint form? Because they were just apathetic. And so as I've moved through, now we're going on week 2. Tomorrow will be 2 weeks that this flag was put up 2 weeks ago. Posting about it, talking about it, because we have to tell our own stories. This happened to me, and thank goodness that more after the flag came down. At first, I said I don't want to even do a story about it. It came down, we're done. But then Greg Bowens, he's a black journalist. He was a former president of the Grosse Pointe Park, Grosse Pointe and Harper Woods Grosse Pointe and Harper Woods NAACP. He said, no, Donna, we have to address why he felt comfortable putting it up in the first place. So this is not over. And I could have
And
said,
what will happen after the media is over? What will happen? Because there hasn't been a direct repercussion for him
correct.
in any way. So if you do not keep the story moving forward, who's suffice it to say, he's fired a loaded rifle up in the air, no repercussion. The gas can, we can only assume that this was again his doing as well. The flag, and there has been no repercussion for him. Has he been cited? Has there been a citation? Has there been any repercussion for him at all to date?
No, no, not at all. And that I agree, and that's why I when Greg said that, I said you are absolutely right. We have to talk about this. So Greg wrote a story in Deadline Detroit, and the story within 24 hours, the story had gone viral. It was picked up by national publications, international publications, because we do have to have this conversation. How is it that this person, much like we just talked about at the Capitol, the U.S. Capitol, that these people have been emboldened, empowered, and voices of hatred have been amplified in this country very loudly for 4 years? What made him think that it was okay to own a KKK flag, let alone put it in the window for only his black neighbor, myself, to see, and my daughter? It's unfathomable that in 2021 we'd be having a conversation about somebody putting a Klan flag in the window in Grosse Pointe Park. But the bigger issue is, why did he feel comfortable doing it?
And that is the biggest issue of
That's
all,
the
is
biggest
that
issue. And why
our
do people
country
think
has not moved forward
not
in
at all?
the ways to, when we say things like Black Lives Matter, this is why we say Black Lives Matter,
Not
because they don't.
because they don't. And having to say that and explain it to people, and having to explain this not just to white people, to black people. I had someone black tell me, you know what? I'm looking at your posts. You usually post all this positive stuff. I was posting something every day about, Black History Month facts. And all of your posts have been about this incident that this guy putting his flag up. You just need to let it go, sis. I mean, stop talking about it every day. You're giving him all the power. No, I'm not giving him the power. That's why I'm talking about it.
I don't feel that a Holocaust museum gives the Nazis power.
Right.
It is a important marker and reminder of what happens when power goes unchecked, when
Yeah.
power goes dark, and people are placed as scapegoats for whatever is happening in the society. If we did not have that Holocaust museum, who's to say that again history does not repeat itself? So I do not mean that in any way, shape, or form as disrespect, because I do think that having the Holocaust, it's important.
It's very important.
It's extremely important, so that we
Absolutely.
do not repeat history again, and that the voice of the voiceless, those who have lost their lives and their descendants, um, are in some small way vindicated, or in some small way serve as a reminder of what happens when we don't value human life. So you standing your ground even in the face of another Black person, I want people to also understand that in a system such as this, you almost get beat down to a place where you are in a place of submission. Turn
Mhm.
the other cheek.
Mhm.
Don't cause trouble.
Yep.
You don't want to shake the waters, because when we think about integration, I want people to understand not everybody was for integration. And
Right.
that includes Black folk. They were not on board with integration because of the ruckus that it would stir. So it was young people that said, no, I'm not going to live like this. But there were people who were advocating to keep segregation separate but equal. I don't know how that works, but you know what I'm saying? So I
Mhm.
want people to understand that this system stays in place also by those who are complicit and even on the side of the oppressed who do not challenge.
Right. And it's easy to do. It's easy to do. The thing is that I realize that this issue, and I've said all along, this is bigger than me.
That's right.
That I know a lot of people. People know who I am. I've built a lot of relationships, and I've in this particular situation, I've been able to leverage those relationships to get in front of the media, to um, you know to get people to listen to me, to get the Michigan Department of Civil Rights to call me back. Um, and then, the director of the Michigan Department of Civil Rights said, have you talked to the Attorney General's office? Well, let me reach out to them. My Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence reached out to me. My state senator Adam Hollier was on the floor of the Senate, um, talking about me. City council members here in my city reached out to me because people know who I am, and I've done a lot of work in the community, and people respect me. What about the person who doesn't have my voice,
That's
who
right. I
doesn't
was
know
just going
anybody
to
on
go
city
there.
council, who doesn't know someone who works for Brenda Lawrence, who can't get a reporter to their door, who can't, who doesn't have a friend who knows Maureen McDonald personally, who doesn't have a friend. I had someone, text me, hey, I know Devin Skillion. I'll call Devin. What about those people? The people who don't have 1,700 Facebook friends, who aren't business owners. Um, what about those people? And that's why I keep talking about it. Somebody Black was mistreated in Grosse Pointe Park yesterday and
Which
the day
means
before
all of
that.
us were mistreated in Grosse
Right.
Pointe yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody was mistreated in the points. Somebody was mistreated somewhere. Black. Somebody Black was mistreated somewhere in Metro Detroit today. If that's why I'm doing this, it has to stop. We have to. I'm not asking for anything extraordinary. I didn't ask the Grosse Pointe Park Police to, hey, why don't you guys come over here and buy me a new Mercedes? My favorite car is a Porsche anyway. But
Mhm.
but
Right. Right.
but I
Right.
didn't. I didn't. I'm not asking for anything extraordinary.
Right.
They after this happened, and the police came out. They went and bought, like you were just talking about the situation with Dylan Roof, who was the killer in the church that you were talking about. He prayed with those people and then slaughtered them.
Slaughter.
He prayed with them and then he slaughtered them, and he was rewarded with Burger King. They took him without incident. They arrested him without incident and took him to get something to eat as a reward after he slaughtered those people. This man put a Klan flag up in his window, and the police department went and bought him curtains. They bought my next door neighbor curtains. So they used my tax dollars and my resources, because I'm a taxpayer, to buy him curtains. He committed an act of hatred, ethnic intimidation, as far as I'm concerned, a hate crime.
That's
And he
correct.
is, and they gave him a gift. No one called me and said, "Hey, Mrs. Dinges, are you okay? Is your daughter okay? Do we just need to send a priest, a minister, a Buddha, a yogi, somebody to sit with you?
Somebody.
Somebody to sit with you. The Michigan Department of Civil Rights to sit with you. No. Can we bring you something to eat, something to drink, a bottle of water? Do you need some help? No. Um, all the calls, everything was very performative. We want you to come over to the city, and they wanted me to come over so that they could smooth my ruffled tail feathers. But what they didn't know is that sister had taken a pair of clippers and I took the guard off, honey, and I zero ball faded those tail feathers off. There's no tail feathers to smooth. Okay, because I needed them to understand this is not a kumbaya moment. This is a watershed moment. There's a time to sing kumbaya, but when there isn't a time to sing kumbaya, don't ask me to sing it. And I happen to know all the words, but I ain't gonna sing them. We need to demand to be treated equally. And the fact that we're still saying this, it's not 1967. This is 2021. We had a black president for 8 years. We need to demand to be treated equally. If I'm speeding and they stop me and they stop my ex-husband who's white, treat me like you would treat him, because that was part of it too. But what would you have had us do differently? What should we have done? Treat him like you would have treated somebody black, because you would come to my door with brute force. And if you don't want to go to his door with brute force, then don't come to mine with brute force. But that's what we have to do. And so those of us who have a voice, those of us who have resources, be willing to leverage those resources for people you don't even know. And that's what I'm doing in this moment. I'm having this conversation and I keep talking about this and talking about it and I'm hoarse because I've given so many interviews. And this is my third.
Help amplify your voice too, Jadonna, and to interject here for those who are watching and for those who consider themselves allies. Yes. This is the time for you to act.
This is the time for you to speak up.
This is the time to act. We don't need a fade to black icon on your social media. No. We don't need just another BLM, picture.
No.
We need the I know Devin Skillion. We need we're going to apply pressure on the police to have him to have formal charges filed. And you have so many friends and some people who love you. And I'm just inviting those who do love you, myself included, to go to the precinct and demand the charges be filed. And I think that there's something there, and I'm going to call it out, white women going to the precinct and saying, Jadonna's my friend. And formal charges have not been brought. She has been harassed, intimidated, and for bullets to go up in there, I mean, that's life-threatening.
Absolutely.
So I'm just imagining that, when Karen makes the phone call, things shift. So I'm asking Karen to make a phone call on Ken so that something is done, because we can, yes, speak to it, but we're going to need white people to tear down white supremacy.
Absolutely. I mean, that was part of the conversation. So, I was talking to a reporter from the Free Press earlier today, and I kind of laid it out. So after the story went viral, then the phone began to ring. The mayor called, and the city manager, and the police chief, and all of these officials began to call me from the city, and they asked me to come to a meeting with the chief. Now I explained to a friend of mine who's white why I felt the need to take an attorney with me. I hadn't done anything wrong, but I think sometimes, we don't get what we don't get, right? And so sometimes we have to explain stuff to people. And so I explained to this friend of mine who's white, this white woman, why I couldn't walk into a meeting with a white man by myself. I knew that I wasn't walking into the meeting with the police chief. First of all, the police chief has a gun. And I'm not saying that he would have harmed me. But I'm smart. I'm too smart to walk into a meeting and take those kind of chances. Because Sandra Bland didn't kill herself. She died at the hands of police officers. I don't care.
And let's just be honest, the power dynamic. So there's you, and so you have armed white men. Mm-hmm. You are outnumbered.
Absolutely.
So I just want to invite, just looking at, a rape victim. You wouldn't send a rape victim into a room with all men,
That's correct.
knowing that again, it brings up, it conjures up, right?
That's
The
correct.
incident, and then you're going to have to talk about it again. It does not yield any comfort. And so again, in this incident, his comfort was prioritized
Correct. Over my comfort. But
over, right, exactly.
but the thing is that and that's why every time I tell this story, I tell that part of the story because it's important for us to understand how to ensure our own comfort and to put ourselves in a position to win whatever it is we're doing. So I was too smart. I knew better than to go into. I said this to a friend the other day. I said, and this is my experience, this is my belief that a black woman should not go into a room with a white man in a situation like that, that power dynamic we talked about by herself. And I mean, whether it's a situation like this at work or whatever, unless you're dating him. Real talk. Take somebody with you. And so I decided to take an attorney with me. And I have an attorney. She's a bad sister. But Greg Bowens called me. She said, "You know who you need to take?" I said, "Who?" He said, "Todd Perkins." And I just laughed. And I let out a hearty laugh because Todd Perkins is no joke. Todd Perkins is a black attorney. He lives in Grosse Pointe Shores. And he currently has a federal lawsuit against the city of Grosse Pointe Shores because they gave him a citation for saying that his Black Lives Matter sign was too large. That's who you want to take with you. So I took Greg and Todd. So we walk into this meeting, and sure enough, the police chief was there, a detective. So you had two white men with guns, and the city manager. So if I had walked into that meeting, I would have been walking into the meeting with three white men and me. But there were three of us, three black folks and three white folks sitting across from one another. So you have to make sure that you are doing things that make you feel comfortable, even in the midst of being so uncomfortable. And they were uncomfortable. And I was okay with them being uncomfortable because I felt pretty doggone comfortable with my attorney there and Greg Bowens. And so that's what we have to do, help each other understand how to have these uncomfortable situations feel a little bit more comfortable as you're walking through it and as you're unpacking all the things. So we had this, conversation about what happened and what we could do. And what I said was exactly what you just said. Black people we cannot fix what we did not break. We cannot dismantle what we did not create. We didn't create systemic racism. We can't dismantle it. White people have to dismantle it. White people have to be willing to do the hard work. And white people have to be willing to have the hard conversations and stop gaslighting us and stop telling us that we aren't seeing what we're seeing, what we know we've seen, that we haven't experienced what we've experienced. When I spoke at the rally, that was part of what I said, is that, we're constantly gaslit. We're constantly told that we're not experiencing what we've experienced, even when we have the PTSD and the bullet holes to prove it.
And you begin to second guess yourself, even the most logical person. Well, maybe I'm being too sensitive.
Right.
It's not that bad. No, it is exactly what it is. And Jadon, I really want people to understand that, I've seen the uptick in the violence in the Asian community,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the sentiment that keeps repeating itself is, that could have been my brother, my grandfather, my sister. And so
Absolutely.
it lends itself to, things don't shift until it's you, until it really kind of gets in your backyard.
Yep.
And Howard Thurman said this, and I think this is so good. He said, to love humanity is too broad. You have to love people in particular. And you
It's
have to,
powerful.
right? So to see you, they have to see you as a sister, as a mother, as something that they hold dear and sacred. And until we are seen that way, there's no impetus to change anything.
Absolutely.
And so the
Absolutely.
love that you stand in consistently, because you stand in love, and I want people to understand at
Thank
the time
you.
my voice, this woman stands in love.
Thank
But
you.
Love is not always syrupy, romantic, and delusional.
Absolutely.
Love is going to correct anything that is its opposite. And so she stood in self love, self truth, and brought in those who love her and has rallied a community of people who love her. So if you love a Black person, love a gay person, love a trans person, love like that love that you have, it has to translate into action.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is, I just feel like with George Floyd's lynching, George Floyd's murder,
Lynching, that's
he
correct.
put a human face. People had to put a human face. I don't know why that people didn't see it before, because to me there was always a human face on it. When Trayvon Martin was murdered, that brought me to my knees. I don't have a son. I have nephews, but he was a human being. This was someone's child. He was murdered, and to I think for some people there has to be a human face on it, on these matters, and for it just happens to be my face right now. People know me in the community. I'm a business owner, and so people may not have known my name, but after they saw the story, oh my gosh, that's that woman that owns that store. Um, it has to become, people have to make it human. They have to make these stories, make them human, make people human, help people understand. So many times when, like with George Floyd's lynching, then they wanted to bring up he may have been on drugs and all the things he did wrong. Hey, he jaywalked when he was 8. Um, I'm glad that I'm pretty squeaky clean, because I think if they would find, if they wanted to find something, they try to find it. But there's
That's
nothing to
correct. Because
find.
Rosa Parks wasn't the first. Like, this isn't the new virtuous victim.
Right.
That trope, unfortunately, it is not new. And
No,
there's nothing to justify it, or perhaps
nothing.
those things may make you sleep better at night to find that he maybe had some infractions, or he had COVID, and that was no. Someone put their body weight on his neck for almost 9 minutes, and his life was snuffed out.
Yes.
There was nothing that he could have done to justify that, because last I checked, we have a judicial system where everyone has the right to due process. And so
Absolutely.
even there was a theft, everyone has a right to due process. But
Yes.
sadly, when you carry the skin like ours and melanation, that same system doesn't apply to you. So I just wanted to
You froze up a little bit. Can't hear you. I'm sorry.
you're getting your
Our
rest.
technology.
But before,
There we
yeah,
go.
so before we close tonight, Jadonna, what are some direct actions that we can take to support you?
Well, one of the things that I think has to happen is that, like the expression, when you see something, say something. I think that's one of the things that we have to do. If you see um, an injustice, say something. Don't, if it's happening, if it's happening to you, call somebody, call a friend, call a neighbor. Like I called my neighbor when this initially happened, so that someone else would know what was going on. So that's one thing. Two, I think that I know that there are people, lots of people who support me. There are lots of people. They showed up. There were 800 people, 800 pairs of feet on the ground in my community, and I thank everybody for that. But if you live in this community, if you live in Metro Detroit, and you're hearing this story, and you think that the way that the police chief, I mean, there was a quote in the Grosse Pointe News from the interim police chief here in Grosse Pointe Park, saying that he thought that my neighbor next door with the Klan flag just got fed up. He just got fed up and made a bad decision. No, that wasn't a bad decision. That was a deliberate act of hatred and intimidation. I was furious when I saw that quote and got fed up with what? My black face, my black body, my daughter's black face, her black body living next door to you. Um, and so there is a search for a police chief here in Grosse Pointe Park. And the interim chief, Jim Bostock, is in the running for that seat. He cannot be elevated to that position. I think we need to demand that his name be removed from consideration. He absolutely cannot become the police chief. All of this happened under his watch. The gasoline incident, not the shooting, because that was 5 or 6 years ago. There was a different chief, and he was bad too. But the gasoline incident, the purchasing of rewarding him with curtains, the
Unmarked
flag,
vehicles, right? The
the
unmarked
unmarked
vehicle.
van, all of it. It happened on his watch. He cannot be elevated to that position. He just cannot. This police department has been around for 71 years. They've never had a black or brown person that served. That has to change. They're going through diversity and inclusion training, which is great, but they did that 10 years ago when when 5 officers were caught taunting a developmentally challenged black man. And they weren't fired. Nobody was fired. They were put on paid administrative leave. They went through diversity training, and here we are 10 years later dealing with the same type of foolishness. This department has to be integrated. They're saying they can't find any black and brown officers, but their backyard is in Detroit. So I said, if you stop building walls and start building bridges, maybe you could talk to your neighbors and figure out how to find some black officers. Hell, we need to hold them accountable. Where's the diversity? This is 2021. Where's the diversity? There needs to be accountability when officers don't do their jobs. And the person who is in charge of the police department right now, the interim chief, cannot be elevated to that position. So I would encourage everybody who's watching right now to reach out to the Grosse Pointe Park city manager. His name is Nick Seisland. You can get his email from the Grosse Pointe Park website, and reach out to the city council, Grosse Pointe Park City Council, and tell them that Jim Bostock cannot become the chief of our police department. He just cannot. The culture, there has to be a culture shift in this community in order for things to change. That's the only thing that is going to make it better, is if there is a culture shift, and people have to demand it. It's not going to happen because we want it to happen. It's time out for the hand wringing and singing kumbaya and hashtags. We have to demand action. That's the only way things are going to change. We have to demand action.
That's right. And I just want to thank everyone for watching, and please share this on the replay. Please follow the directive that Donna has given us. And I also want to remind people, our children are watching us. They're watching
Yes.
not only what we say, but what we do. And in action
Yes.
also shows them that this isn't a big enough problem. This isn't an issue. And how can we talk about love and community when we're not looking out for every member of our community, and how it impacts, a system impacts disproportionately a member of our community. And Jadon, I'm gonna take it further. Our family. You are our family.
Yes. Thank you. And you all are mine.
And we love you.
Thank you. And I love you all. One more thing I want to add. So yesterday the racist trolls came to my Facebook page. The name of my business is Margot and Max. It's MARGAUX ampersand or and sign Max MAX. I would ask that if you folks could please support me in making sure that these racist trolls do not come to my page and try to damage my business. They put up false reviews saying that we weren't COVID compliant, we weren't wearing masks. I've been closed. My business closed on March 15th of last year, and we've remained closed, and we're just online. So I would ask that people please, if you have an opportunity, give us a review, give us a little shout out, even if you say, if you haven't been to the store, you may not be able to tell that experience, but that we are closed. And if we could get some support around that, that would be really nice to help drive those negative reviews down, because these people have not been to my business. They don't even live in the state, but yet they're trying to destroy my business. I would appreciate some support there. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And so I will get on that as well, especially for those who just completed my Decolonize Your Business course. I will get your information over to the community there as well,
Thank
so
you.
that we can get the support that you need. But you are loved. I'm
Thank
praying
you.
for you. We're praying for you. And this
Thank
is
you.
not over.
It
And
isn't.
we're just going to continue to stand on the side of righteousness. And what side of history you end up on starts with the choices that you make today. So
Absolutely. Thank you. I love you, girl.
I love
Thank you. I
you.
appreciate you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. You all have a great evening. You have your marching orders, and let's get this done. Amen.
All right. Amen. Thank you so much.
Amen. And so it is.